Welcome back, everyone, to R2Kast number 98. Last week we had, well, it was a bit of a fangirling moment for me, actually, because we had Karen Moynihan on, who I've followed on TikTok for some time, and it turns out I've actually been following her since her second ever video. She had 34 followers, so it sounded like a bit of a weirdo when I told her that one, but that is the case. Next week, we've got Neil Barrett, or NJB Hoof Care on the old Instagrams, who came on to talk about his career as a hoof trimmer. And then we spoke about mental health and got really deep and opened up to each other. So two bearded men talking about their sort of past truths for a good hour, and then a wee bit about his sort of bovine beautician side. Obviously only 2 episodes away from the 100, quite exciting. The 100th episode is recorded. I will give you the tip I've given you in the last 5 or 6 episodes, that the 100th episode is with someone that has been on the podcast before. These are all going to be no, let's not give any more away. I've managed till now. This is the last one I'm filming that is going to be out before it, so that is all you're getting. Quite looking forward to it. Big announcement coming. And yeah, today we have got 5 people on from an organisation that there's been a few sort of companies, organisations throughout the R2Kast that I've spoke with, been involved with, that have sort of been around my life forever. You know, been brought up in a farm. Some things have just always been there, and this is definitely one of them. Today we've got quite a few representatives from NFU Scotland. What we'll do is we'll go around everyone, we'll get everyone introduced, because it's not just one person. We do have 5, as I said. So purely because of who I have in front of me on the screen, we're going to go around in clockwise order. It's probably going to be different for everyone else. But just before we get started with another episode of the R2Kast, I would like to thank our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan Rural are heavily involved on the social media scene in the ag space, with 120,000 followers on Instagram. They use this following to host social media takeovers with farmers throughout the country to showcase their stories. They also post to their rural community blog with further stories about these people in the industry. On top of this, they like to support initiatives that are championing the British agricultural industry, such as myself. So thank you to A-Plan Rural for that. Amy, would you like to say hello first? Just tell us a quick hello, and we'll go around and then we'll go more in depth as we go.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone, and thank you so much for having us, Wallace. So I'm Emmy Dyer. I am the newest recruit at NFU Scotland. I've been there since February, so not very long at all. But I look after the social media side of NFUS. You can see anything you see on Instagram, on Facebook, or on Twitter. It's probably me behind it. Yeah, I do that, and I also do some of the communications side as well, so dealing with press inquiries, and also I have some involvement in the magazine as well. I wrote a little article a couple months ago, just on our social media presence, so it's really nice to be getting involved in the more nitty-gritty side of it. Yeah, really enjoying it so far.
Excellent. And for those on the call that know anything about me, and for those that don't, I'm going to tell you anyway. I'm a bit of a social media nerd, so I'm actually excited to ask you a few questions. Moving round in the same order as Lisa next. Lisa, could you tell us a bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Lisa. I work as Livestock Policy Advisor at the Union. I've been here for 16 months-ish. I started this role in December, and beforehand I was a policy assistant at the Union. Similarly to you, Wallace, I grew up on a family farm, so NFUS was something that kind of had floated around the kitchen table for a long time, and somehow I've ended up here.
It's like
negative, but I didn't mean it as negative. It's a good thing.
Ended up, no, we know what you mean. Yeah, NFU has just been like a word forever. Like, I've always been aware of it. That and Scottish farmer are probably the 2 things that I knew first. Funnily enough, not surprising, it would have been sort of near the first few words I ever had. Sarah?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah, and I'm the Environmental Resources Policy Manager. So a lot of my policy remit deals with environmental regulations like air quality, water quality. So work a lot alongside SEPA, the regulator. my other policy remits include plant protection products, circular economy, flooding, and also biodiversity, which is an exciting topic at the minute. Unlike some others on this call, I'm not from a farming background. I joined NFU Scotland just over 2 years ago, and that was a new entrant, as you will, to farming.
Yeah, I think it's important we have people from different backgrounds, different cultures coming in. For quite a while, this sector was so. The first question was, "Are you from a farm?" And it's quite sort of reductive in some ways, and I'm quite glad that we're seeing so much more intake from elsewhere. It's important. Moving on to Penny.
Hi, yeah. I've been with the union now for 15 years, I think it is. I started as livestock policy manager and have kind of taken on various different roles. Keep it interesting since I've been here. Currently, I cover pigs and poultry working groups, so I've got responsibility for those. I'm from an animal health and welfare background, so I cover animal health and welfare across all species. So I have a lot of crossover with Lisa on the sort of bigger livestock health and welfare issues. And for my sins, I also have taken over the sort of point of species management within the union, which is really dealing with all the conflicts between various species and agriculture.
Excellent. I had quite a few questions because a lot of that's very topical at the minute, isn't it? Yeah. Difficultly topical, I'm sure, for yourself at times.
Yeah, I feel I have a lot of the kind of difficult subjects that I cover.
And last but by no means least, Beatrice.
Yeah, I'm Beatrice. I'm the political affairs manager at NFU Scotland. So I've been in the role for just coming up to 2 years. And like Sarah, I have no farming experience whatsoever. I came from whisky before this, so they are kind of linked, but very different. And my job entails dealing with and engaging with the MSPs, MPs, ministers, and spending a lot of time in Westminster and Holyrood.
And I'm sure with that remit, sometimes whiskey's required. No, I'm joking. But yeah, pretty interesting background. Do you know, whiskey's something I always wish I liked. I feel like it's so sophisticated to go out and buy a fancy bottle of whiskey, but it just burns my tum-tum, so I can't face it.
There's tips. And if we ever meet, I can show you how to drink it so that doesn't happen.
It's going to be a dangerous game. It's going to end terribly. Very, very bad. The first thing I kind of want to jump to, I'll probably sort of ask throughout the session, each of you, how your day goes, you know, what a sort of normal week in each of your life is. But the one thing I really wanted to jump in, because I'm terrible at forgetting things that are quite important questions, is starting with yourself, Penny, is pigs and poultry are two. Well, I'll tell you what, we'll jump on to Emmy. Emmy, you're obviously new sort of into job at the minute, and involved in that social media. NFU in general is a thing that's working with farmers, for farmers, trying to sort of push that agenda that it's not a bad thing, it's a good thing, and sort of show the good produce that we're producing. What role is social media playing in that?
Yeah, I think that's an interesting question, especially with the sort of target audience of social media versus sort of our average member. I think social media is really important in speaking to a really wide audience. So the younger generation, as well as people who aren't from a farming background at all, who have no prior knowledge of what is involved in producing food and being within agriculture. And I think we're hoping to use our social media platforms to speak more about I think ongoing issues, so the stuff that we cover in our magazine, and sort of bringing that more to the forefront of our messaging and really speaking to the public rather than just keeping it within our membership. I think that's my main focus.
And does that start sort of from, like, are you targeting that purely at adults, or are you looking at getting involved in schools and stuff like that as well?
It's a great question. I think, and it's something to think about as well. At the moment, we're just looking at our current, just engaging our current audience more, but there's definitely scope for talking in schools more. And as I was saying, I really, really want to get the younger generation involved, which of course does involve schools, but also involves young farmers. I think young farmers are very much an untapped resource in what we do currently. There seems to be a big gap between people who are memberships of the union and people who are watching our content on Instagram and on social media. So I think there's definitely a bridge that we can build there.
Well, I mean, if it helps, I've just joined the committee for the National Comms and Marketing Committee, and hopefully I'll put in for vice chair as well, which I'll find out in the next 24 hours if there's anything there. So
good luck.
Either I've said that now and this is going to come out in a week or two and I'm going to look very silly, or it's going to look funny. Sorry for jumping away from you, Penny, there. Just looked like something was going on.
For children, sorry.
Oh dear, not at all, not at all. I sometimes feel like looking after myself is enough, never mind more. The pigs and poultry side is something that jumps out. You know, pigs from the pork production and things not getting accepted, and borders and all that is a major issue, and poultry with bird flu and all the problems that are coming there. I guess what I'm trying to ask is, what is it you're dealing with? You'll be dealing with a lot on that side of things at the minute.
Yeah, certainly both sectors are facing fairly troubling times at the moment, or have been going through fairly troubling times. The poultry side, avian influenza has been incredibly significant over the last couple of years. So yeah, we had a really bad year, thought it couldn't get much worse, and then it did get worse. And it's been, spreading out much more awareness across the general public as well, with a lot more wild birds being affected. But it's been really problematic for poultry producers, and really quite frightening, because the impacts of getting the disease are really significant, and quite, they cost a lot. There's a lot of time, there's a lot of emotion involved, and it's very, very difficult. So I've been really feeling for them, struggling with that. We are desperately touching wood that things seem to be quietening down a little bit. So hopefully we can sort of take a bit of a breather and look at what we've learned from it. We've actually got a biosecurity seminar happening tomorrow for poultry producers to kind of look at some of the lessons we have learned over the past couple of years, about what you can do to help try and protect birds from this really difficult disease. So they've been struggling, and they've not been able to get insurance against avian influenza, and it's been making, and with very poor prices, particularly on the egg side, it has been making producers putting birds in or not, which has then had the knock-on effect that we've been seeing shortages on the shelves and things like that. And although the retailers blame it all on avian flu, it's a lot of it coming down to the fact that excuse me, prices haven't been great. So if you're faced with not getting paid a lot for your product, but you've got a huge risk of putting birds in from avian influenza, then a lot of them have taken that decision to just step back for a bit. And pigs, well, they were hit really badly with COVID problems. Some of the processors, when they had problems with COVID in the factories and shut down, it caused big backlogs of pigs on farm, which have taken months and months to get past and get back to normal, and has had massive impact on the prices paid for pork, because effectively there's too much of them around, and at a time input costs absolutely soared. The pig guys have been really feeling it. Prices thankfully are improving a little, but we've still got really high input costs associated, and a lot of them are looking at what's coming down the line in terms of regulation, so environmental regulation, some welfare regulation, and wondering, where the money's going to come from to be able to make the changes.
I would just like to quickly interrupt the show for a minute to give you some extra information on our primary sponsors, A-Plan Rural. A-Plan offer bespoke cover for farms and estates the UK over, and will give you tailored insurance for anything on the farm, from your old workhorse tractor that's been around 20 years or a fancy new and exciting diversification.
Yeah, well, that's the worry. That's the worry, is is this a problem we can get out of, and someone actually spoke to me. I was at a show, or not a show, just like a stand, and it was at a school, and they came up and said, "Oh, I saw you see what do you offer?" We spoke about, that we offer agriculture or whatever, and they said, "Oh, agriculture is in a pretty good place, isn't it? Prices went through the roof," and I'm like, "They have, but well, not through the roof. They've went up, but
some sectors,
those input costs as well." Yeah, exactly. Yeah, for sure. Sorry. Yeah, that's a very good point. But yeah, that's the part that, we're a consumer based industry, and the consumer doesn't see that part. You mentioned a really important point there, quite near the start, about sort of like the emotional trauma around this. Is that a thing that the union's involved in helping, or is that more on other sort of organisations?
No, certainly it's something at the union we recognise as being really important. I know when I joined the union, I was told, a lot of the work and things that came on during foot and mouth, and a huge part of our role is to be there and to listen to farmers and to their problems. Obviously we're sort of looking at policy and taking forward, but it's listening to those problems that they're really going through, and trying to make sure that there's advice and support out there. I mean, there's organisations like RSABI who do fantastic work. But as the problem with a lot of sectors, it's getting people to actually talk about these things and to recognise it. We can listen and we can signpost, and we try repeatedly to put things out to try and persuade people to open up. But that's kind of that's that difficult problem. Farmers are a breed unto their own, and not necessarily always willing to come forward when they think they've got a problem. So. Yeah, and times are tough out there. They really are tough for them.
It's here that the opening up things. I mean, like I said in the introduction, that when you listen to 99th episode, the next one with Neil, me and him sort of opened up about difficulties we'd had in the past and stuff like that. But that's taken me 2 years to be able to get to that stage since the trouble, and I think sometimes we're quite quick to say, "Oh, if you open up, it's better." It is. But it's bloody hard doing it when you're in that position. You're like, I'm not fully ready to do this. But an effort to not have this be 2 hours of down in the dump. The next episode.
Sorry.
No, you're not at all. It's very important to talk about. Beatrice, your side of the your job, I guess, is quite an interesting one, dealing with sort of those in Parliament and that sort of thing. How does that work? Are you getting information from the farming community and then passing that on, and then vice versa? And how are those sort of conversations being made?
Yes, I mean, I work very closely with everybody on this call and everybody in the policy team. So they're the experts in all their area, and I know a little bit about a lot of things. So I don't know very much about the detail of what everybody's working on, but I engage, directly talking about things that we want to talk about. But a lot of my work is quite reactive as well. So following legislation through Parliament, and if there's an opportunity for us to underline our key points on issues that are being debated in the Parliament, whether that's in committees or questions or debates, it's kind of looking for those opportunities to underline how important the farming sector is for rural communities and rural economies, but also getting across our key messages and issues as well. And yep, MSPs and MPs phone me up and tell me things, and it's a kind of a two-way conversation. And I absolutely love my job. One of the negatives about it is the changes that happen with politics and the inevitability of elections coming and people that we've got really good relationships with no longer being there. But that's just politics for you, I suppose. So it's never a dull day, I suppose you could say.
I can imagine that's quite tricky. Your job is grand, and maybe things are going great for 4 years, and then, I think, I'm so sorry, I'm terrible at politics. It generally took me on an episode 4 or 5 episodes ago about 30 seconds to remember who the Prime Minister was. Like, I'm so bad at this side of things. But Sturgeon was in for quite some time. I don't know, was she good? Was she bad? Let's assume she was good. You're getting used to that. You're working alongside that, and then suddenly something changes, and let's not say the next person's inherently bad, but trying to work alongside that must be quite a big challenge. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Beatrice, but is agriculture number one on politicians' sort of eye line, if you will? Is what they're looking at first? I assume you've sort of got to really push forward to get that.
I mean, there's not any constituency or region within Holyrood or Scotland, Westminster, that doesn't have farming interest in it. Whether that's an actual farm or whether it's a processing or whether it's, further down the line, etc. So making it relevant to politicians is really important. We have really good relationships with cross-party, with rural affairs spokespeople. That's somebody that I deal with very, very regularly, but it does extend to a lot of other people as well. So I've worked in public affairs now for about 20 years, and I've never been busier in a role, because rural affairs gets a lot of time in Holyrood and in Westminster as well. There's always debates and questions, and it is very, very busy time for farming to be getting a lot of coverage in parliaments.
Yeah, definitely. And that has sort of reminded me of a plug opportunity, if you will. If you are listening, you're sort of thinking, I wonder what else NFUS does. Let's see if I can remember the number of the episode here. I'm pretty sure the president of the NFUS, Martin Kennedy, was number 17. So if you want to go, but if that's right, I've set myself a challenge a few episodes ago. I was like, I can always remember every number, whatever episode was. And now every time I mention it, I feel like there's so much pressure created solely by myself. But yeah, if you want to go back and listen to that, that's there. And also ex-regional manager, yes, that's right, of NFU number 15 with Christine Cuthbertson, who's moved on to Monitor Farm Programme. Sort of another bit of information what's going on there, if that is of interest. Moving on to yourself, Sarah, really interesting topic you're involved in. I mean, we took students back in June to Northern Ireland, and one of the thing I brought back, well, not the thing, one of the main things I brought back was their Hillen Research Centre. They've sort of objectified how you can, monetize different parts of a hill system. And one of the things was looking at biodiversity, and it's a thing we need to be focusing on more. And I think as an agricultural community, we think it's like an afterthought, and it's quite important to hear that you're involved in that. So what's your sort of, you've obviously got more than just biodiversity, I know that, I'm sort of focusing on one thing, but tell us what you're sort of doing there.
So I think biodiversity is a really exciting one at the minute. I think for the past couple of years, climate change and net zero has kind of taken up a lot of space on that kind of change agenda, but it's starting to be recognised more and more that it's not just about climate, it's also about biodiversity and nature as well. And those two things, they do go hand in hand, but they are not always kind of complementary of each other. There's some elements of farming and of land management that can even be in opposition. So we want to see and look at how farming and farming systems can actually benefit biodiversity. And I think farming gets a bit of a hard time sometimes, especially when it comes to climate change. And we are starting to see within the union that we can actually look at biodiversity as a positive. There's many things farmers can do for climate as well, but for biodiversity, it's a particular source of pride for many of our members. They do feel like they are stewards of the environment and of biodiversity. It's something that you can see a lot easier than climate change. It's kind of hard to envision what that looks like, whereas if you see an increase in farmland birds, or if you have a hedgerow, or you can actually see that. And so I think in terms of farmers contributing to their natural environment, it's something that's a lot more tangible. And for the public as well, if the public have got a certain impression of what farming is and what farming does, then being able to see what biodiversity is out there in the fields and as they drive through the countryside, I think that helps boost the public image. In terms of what we're doing, we're trying to kind of get more evidence around what works, what doesn't work. We're trying to mainstream biodiversity, so it's not just the cream of the crop, or the top flyers who do the great things, and that's maybe kind of inspiring, but it's not accessible to everyone. So we're trying to kind of highlight what people can do at all levels, no matter what kind of farming system you have. And you mentioned hill and sheep farms, and I'm working with Lisa as well, and looking at how we can really highlight and really promote the biodiversity that is on those kind of more marginal landscapes. So yeah, just really, I think it's a really going in a positive direction, and there's lots more work to be done.
Yeah, brilliant. And I mean, it's one of those things that, like, I think when you're always going to have those, what would you say, what's the word, early adopters. And then when it's away from the conventional, it's going to take the rest to follow. But I think we're at that stage where we're starting to realise, oh yeah, it's not just a bunch of pretty flowers. There's a lot more to it. And I remember when we shifted from single farm payment to basic payment scheme, sort of really sitting down with mum and dad at whatever age that would be, maybe 18, something like that, and going over the amount of species that was on the farm that you just genuinely did not consider. And sort of looking at promotion of that can only be a good thing for so many reasons. We sort of focused in on one thing of you there, Sarah, just the biodiversity side, but you're also, was environmental policy manager, is that right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what else is involved in that remit? I assume a lot.
There is so much. So yeah, as I kind of mentioned, there's air quality, water quality, which one of the main things I work on under that kind of policy remit is changes to regulations around slurry storage and slurry spreading. So it's quite a hot topic as well within the union. There's a lot of changes. It's one of many changes that are coming in that you know, farming businesses have to kind of adapt and change and fit within these regulations. And part of our role is to, I suppose, be the kind of middle person in terms of explaining to government why these regulations can't be, you know, threaten the viability of farm businesses, but also go to the other side and say, well, the government want to introduce these because it'll have a benefit for water quality and it'll have benefit for air quality if slurry is spread at the right time and it's spread in a way that's not, you know, not kind of damaging the environment. So that's just a couple of things. Also, I work on the circular economy, looking at kind of farm plastics and waste and how in kind of bigger picture circular economy stuff in terms of how farming itself can be circular. And there's actually a lot of really good stories and really good case studies as to how agriculture is the kind of original circular economy. And we've got a new circular economy bill that will be coming this year through Parliament. So that's just another good opportunity to showcase what agriculture does. And it's part of that story of kind of painting it in a good light and showing what it does have and what it does do rather than negative things. And then just kind of lastly in my remit, I also deal with plant protection products, which again can be you know, quite a tricky and complex subject to deal with. But we have to get that message across to government that it's not about no pesticides or spraying everywhere, that we actually need to have a really measured approach through integrated pest management and actually having all the tools available in the toolbox and kind of empowering farmers to make the best decisions is much better than a kind of strict black or white binary choice.
You Sarah seem like one of those people that pretends you don't do anything, but you actually do loads. On about 4 occasions in that one speech, you're like, yeah, we just do that. And then, oh, well, I just do that. They'd say a lot of things. If anyone's interested in that sort of biological control and whatnot, I'm sure Sarah will have something to say later on. But if you look at R2Kast number 77, we spoke a bit about biological control on, that's terrible, Alstroemeria flower. So if you know what that is, great. I didn't. My mum bullied me for it, sent me like 4 million questions that she wanted me to ask, and I didn't understand any of the words. But Ben explained it very good, so go and have a listen to that if you're interested. And again, last but by no means least, Lisa, could you give us a wee bit, well, what's involved in your day-to-day? You've moved obviously from assistant onto the policy side of things, well, from assistant to policy, moving up. Was that change quite a big change? And yeah.
Yeah, I suppose in a way it is a bit of a big change. So I originally started as a policy assistant, so that was quite a mix of things. It was project-based for various remits, so it covered everything from helping Sarah with farm plastics to political monitoring with Beatrice. I'm sure me and Penny did one as well. So it was really good, and it gave me a taste of all the little bits of policy and also an understanding of the huge depth and breadth of everything that the union covers. I think I was probably quite naive when I started in January 2022, thinking, oh, the union does like bits and bobs, but actually it does so much stuff and covers so many different areas. Sarah's probably the best example of that. So yeah, I did that from January to December and then started as livestock policy advisor in December. So I keep fobbing off that I'm quite new, so bear with me, but I do think it's a huge remit in itself. So my kind of day-to-day really varies. I spend quite a lot of time on the phone. It's maybe me, I'm the issue rather than everyone else, but no, I think it's a lot of kind of that context and gathering the scene setting for it. The livestock committee obviously is made up of regional representatives and my chair. We've covered a huge amount of stuff, a lot of it crossing over with Penny. At our previous meetings, things like animal health and welfare, health planning, QMS standards, they had an interim review recently. We've also spoke about kind of that wider, it's a huge question, kind of livestock's role in climate policy and what that looks like. And a lot of it is kind of, it feels a little bit firefighting at times, but demonstrating that livestock's a land management tool and there's a lot of benefits that it brings to biodiversity and climate. And obviously, if you look at the bottom line and you're going on figures that you want to paint in terms of emissions and stuff, it doesn't look great, but there's actually a huge amount of stuff there that land use capability, it couldn't be used for anything else. So kind of that, I don't want to say translation piece, but looking at putting the colour into livestock and making it not completely out to be the baddie. Also within my remit, I look after the LFA committee. So again, a lot of that is looking at like what Beatrice says, adding the colour into what agriculture underpins. LFA covers a huge proportion of Scotland. It's a ridiculous figure that I can't remember right now, and I should know off the top of my head, but it's either 89, I think it's 89% of Scotland's landmass. So that's a huge part of it. And that needs to be supported because it is disadvantaged support areas. So putting the colour into what that means for rural Scotland. And obviously the Scottish Government have committed to rural development, and LFA communities underpin a huge amount of that. And that also ties into biodiversity and stuff like that. So it's hugely varied, trying to figure it out and put all the pieces in place. But it's good. I really, really enjoy it. It's just taking it bit by bit and trying to get all of my ducks in a row.
It's funny you say about being new. I mean, like you are new, 4 months, but I think I'm still be using the, I'm new to this job. I've been there like almost 3 years. I can't use it anymore. I still try and use it when I can. The LFA side's quite interesting. 89 is correct because it was, I'm pretty sure it's 7.15 million hectares of Scotland is LFA, and Scotland is 7.878 million hectares. 7.878 million. Because I did it in a class about 2 months ago.
So you could just say it was a test. You're testing me. There you go. Got it right.
Yeah, but also what I said could be absolute nonsense, but I'm pretty sure no, 89 I'm pretty sure is right. I couldn't remember the percentage, but I was doing the maths in my head and I had about 90. So what was the thing I was going to ask you? I was going to say something. I mean, LFA in general, like it's what 90% of the country is in a less favoured area, and it's important that we're supporting that ground. And I think we're moving into tricky waters, shall we say, with subsidies and where they're going and whatnot. And I have a bit of a worry as to where support is going to go, and hopefully things like LFA are still going to wait around and we're going to have that support in place. But I liked your point about sort of bringing colour into farming and showing that it's not all bad, and talking about the good sides. And I know I'm maybe a bit biased on this, but a carbon calculator company, I won't say the name on the basis I can't remember it, but it was a slightly different name. It was began with a Y, but I can't remember the name. They put a post out on Facebook saying, talking about the high emissions of livestock farming, and it's a photo of what I would assume is some kind of Swiss Fleckvieh cow on the hills of Switzerland with about 5 or 6 different flower varieties in this small photo in the front. And I remember thinking, like, this is truly the picture of what we're after. Like, you're on a hill here that you're not going to be getting a combine on. So if you can get that cow, you can get that sheep up there, and we're producing some kind of protein off there, and it's 0% transported, synthetic transportation of water. Like, that's got to be a good thing. So I think that's an important narrative to get over. Jumping kind of back a bit to yourself, Penny. I think you said it was 15 years you've been involved. It's quite interesting to see how have things changed over. I think if I've got my calculations right, you've got more experience than everyone put together in here at the NFU specifically. How have you seen things change over that decade and a half? You're muted, Penny.
probably depressingly very little, I would say. It's a bit of a standing joke that the union was started way back when with dairy farmers complaining about the price of milk, and still number one topic on our dairy committee is price of milk. So yeah, you don't get it's a very glacial rate of change within farming, I think. The problems remain largely the same. It's just looking at different priorities and trying to kind of use different levers, I suppose, to get results. Yeah, a lot of the same issues. I mean, it is how we can help, how we can better help the environment, and how we can be more efficient. Selling the message of farming and the importance of what farming involves and what it delivers, and the importance of providing food for the nation, that kind of thing. That doesn't really change. We get different political parties in that might have a slightly different priority on moving forwards. Different characters in that maybe want to make a name for themselves politically and things, and different priorities. But largely, we remain our commitment to basically trying to ensure that we've got a thriving farming community for the future.
I assume one of the biggest sort of shifts is the movement from the environment was always a thing, something we had to consider, but I'm guessing it's a much more positive approach now from the sector.
Absolutely. I mean, it was definitely still being talked about when I joined 15 years ago, and we were very much saying, guys, this is going to become really important. And that probably is the biggest change over the 15 years, is that change of priority, definitely coming up against climate change and biodiversity as being the absolute number one. Previous mixes on things like cheap food for the nation and things like that have maybe slipped a bit further down the list, but they're still there. And so now you've got to get that balance, and that's the really tricky thing. It's balancing all those different priorities that we have, so that we can deliver our priorities on climate change and biodiversity, but we can still feed the nation. We can still have a thriving agricultural sector and rural communities. And that's the trick, isn't it? The balance.
Yeah, exactly. And it probably opens up a bit of a question that I'll throw out to all five of you and see if anyone wants to jump in, or if anyone absolutely doesn't want to jump in, which I could also imagine being the case. What do you think Brexit means for farming? Everyone's like, mute, walk out the room.
Well,
don't answer that one.
I'll maybe start, and obviously I was working for the organisation whilst we were having the Brexit question and debate, and I think it doesn't mean what a lot of people thought it would mean. A lot of focus on, so that's a big change in my job. A lot of my work was done at European level in terms of regulation and things, and a lot of kickback from farmers about regulations and things coming from Europe. And I think was to some seemed, and to a lot of the public that voted for it, that this was a way of getting away from some of that European regulation. But unfortunately, it doesn't mean that, because if we want to trade, we've still got to comply with European regulation. We now just don't have a voice in Europe and saying what that regulation will be. And we're already seeing that it is having impact on trade. We took for granted, I think, free trade between ourselves and Europe, and now having to undergo checks and restrictions and things is difficult. And it's been hard at all levels. For instance, I know it's not just livestock, or it's not just the agricultural products, it's the products that you need. I mean, we were having great problems getting things like egg boxes, which were largely made on the continent over. We're way down the pecking list now for products like that. So if there's a shortage of supply, we're the ones that aren't going to get it. And it's made everything a lot more complicated in terms of accessing inputs and yeah, looking at trade. My one thing that I do always hope will come from it is that we'll, for my health and welfare hat on, benefits on disease control, because we've got more control over the border now. But unfortunately, government don't seem to be pushing that bit forward as fast as we would like. So we're getting the negatives of a trade border without any of the benefits.
Yeah, it does sort of, and again, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I always sort of feel like one of the things we're seeing is we are keeping our rightfully so high standards that come with a production cost, but still importing products that do not. And that's a bit of a worrying one. What about the other four guys? Maybe you haven't been in the NFU for as long a period of time, maybe seen a look from external external perspectives, I guess. What do you think it means for the future?
I think, like you say, I've not been here for long enough, but even just in the 4 months looking at livestock particularly, there's things like export health certificates now need a vet declaration. Mm-hmm. So if you're exporting something that's alive or dead, it still needs to have a vet sign off on it. And that's just another thing to do, and a bit of red tape alongside that. So things like Penny said as well, trade agreements, we've opened ourselves up to vulnerability from a red meat point of view. I mean, there is opportunity in there as well. It depends whether you're a glass half full or a glass half empty. But thus far, I think it's fair to say we've opened up for imports rather than seeing the export benefits of it. But that's really quite a superficial look at what I've seen in the past 4 months. But really just, it seems like a bit onerous. It's like Penny says, we're now having to make decisions that maybe we haven't made before, and that's clunky in itself a little bit. But that's just my naive input on that.
Well, you're saying naive, Lisa, which I'm sure isn't true. But what's your opinion? Maybe from, you said you were brought up on a farm, from that perspective. You know, from actually being on a farm perspective.
I suppose, like Penny says, it's not at home. Is there a natural impact? I don't know whether you see it at farm level or on our farm level as a child of a farm. I don't know that I've seen it when I go home and think about it in that context. For sure, working at the union, I go home and I look through things in a completely different lens. I was at home the weekend and all of a sudden I think of things quite differently. I always joke that I must be a pain when I go home now because I'm full of bright ideas. But yeah, at farm level, things like increased input costs. I mean, obviously that was a huge result of the Ukraine war, but there's things like fertilizer processing that's limited within the UK. So we rely quite heavily on having a good relationship with the EU for that. That becomes more strained now that we're not part of the EU. So little things like that trickle through. You might not on the surface think it's a direct impact of not being in the EU, but it all has a bit of a red thread running through it.
And I guess it's an important question over to yourself, Sarah. I mean, it's not strictly through Brexit having happened, but when you're talking about air and water quality, I'm guessing the main thing you're looking at the minute is the transition towards away from splash plates and into dribble bars. It's going to be a massive one, which is going to be a one of the things that, like you were saying, trying to work both sides that farmers have to do. It's the rule now. But it's a massive expense, and sort of trying to show that this is the way forward is tricky. And with that, what's the word, uncertainty of how finances are going to look post Brexit, that must be quite a tricky one for you to sort of to show the benefits, if you will. I guess what I'm more asking is there more to come from an air and water quality perspective that's going to be that we're expecting to see in the near future? No, I'm not strictly saying a massive change like the splash plate dribble bar, but is there more to come in the near future?
There definitely will be more to come, and I think what you say about kind of selling the benefits and I suppose asking for more funding, which is a lobbying organisation, is a lot of what we do. And in this current climate where we do have a cost of living crisis, everything is stretched, it's become more and more kind of acute, you know, the importance of asking for more, considering the landscape which farmers operate in, but also just the landscape that public finance is operating in. It's so under so much pressure. So we've definitely got our work cut out for us there. In terms of more coming down the line for air and water quality, again, you know, the Scottish Government is committed to keeping pace with the EU. So while we are out of it now, there's still that kind of uncertainty about what happens in Europe is that going to impact us here, and will that kind of trickle down to us in Scotland? I'll mention air quality specifically because it is an area where agriculture is particularly not great, especially ammonia emissions. Again, I also should know this percentage off the top of my head, but I think it's about 98% of ammonia emissions in Scotland come from agriculture. So that's a huge, obviously, a completely huge number that we need to reduce. And the approach so far from government has been a voluntary approach. So there's plans through the Clean Air for Scotland strategy for a voluntary code of practice for farms to basically adopt best practice measures to reduce their ammonia emissions. And with that also comes climate benefits as well. So that's the approach they're taking. But as we get further and further towards the end of the decade, and if we don't see these ammonia emissions reduce, then there is that danger, I'll say, of more regulatory, the regulatory instruments coming in to kind of force farmers, I suppose, to reduce their emissions. And we have seen that with the changes to the slurry storage and spreading rules. It's not a choice anymore. That's what you have to do. So I would say that a lot of our work is trying to be on the front foot, encourage farmers to get ahead of the game. Where there is funding available, apply for it, because you don't know when that's going to come again, and you don't know when it's going to be mandatory, and you might not get support for it. So really being on the front foot is really key to resilience in this area. But absolutely there'll be more things coming down the line.
Air quality is one that I'm embarrassingly not up on at all. I mean, water quality makes sense because it's like they're all tangible things, but it's like in my head, it's a thing happening. It's something going into a water course, it's eutrophication happening. But I struggle to sort of fathom the air side. I really do. And in my head, I'm like, is there a way we can harness methane? Is there a way, but that's a massive infrastructure input, I would assume. And yeah, it's more I'd quite like to read up on. Would you be interested, Sarah, in coming in and doing a wee talk to students? I'd quite like to get you into to chat about all that sort of stuff. That would sound class, or is that something you'd absolutely hate to do? You don't have to. I'll kick some out then. No, I'm sure. I put you on the spot there. That's a bit unfair. We can speak off camera, but Amy, you're sort of, I guess, maybe not the face of this, but you're the person that's sort of creating the face of everyone here and making sure it looks good. And you've sort of got to not be an expert in every part, of course, but sort of understand here and there. You're quite new. I can't remember who's newer to their current post out, yourself and Lisa, but I knew you're pretty. I think it's you, isn't it?
It's me, yeah.
It's you, yeah. So what's your job involved in that sense? What's your day to day?
My day looks different literally every time I log on. Sometimes I will log on to my emails and I'll check and I'll have a list of requests of stuff to go out on social media. So stuff to do with policy updates, sharing surveys that we need to inform our lobbying decisions. It's mainly getting the word out about what we're doing. And obviously that looks different day to day because there's so much changing and there's so much, as you've heard, there's so much that we look after, there's so much that we do. But for me, I think I'm focused on just creating a very cohesive looking brand for us to make us really stand out. I think definitely in a social media aspects, I would like to do, this is something why I was so interested in coming into the podcast, this sort of video and audio side of things is becoming so important, and having that voice where people can actually hear you rather than just seeing what you're posting about is so important to getting those messages heard a lot more, especially with the rise of TikTok, which I'm terrified of as a platform. TikTok scares me as a social media manager. I know I probably shouldn't say that, but yeah, it's huge, and there's a lot to be done, but my day it varies. I also look after design as well, so I do I'm updating some resources for us, so sort of jack of all trades when it comes to our digital presence.
You all seem like not even just Jack, but master of all trades. Like, yes, I do this, but I do all of this for that, and then I do this job. Yeah, it's just TikTok scares you. That's an interesting one.
It does.
It's reducing our ability to focus, or why?
I think it's because of how easy it is for stuff to go viral on there. It's so easy for something that you put out to be misinterpreted. And when we're doing stuff with agriculture, where there are subjects that people have a lot of strong opinions on, it's quite worrying to put out a strong statement that you could then be met with a lot of backlash from people who aren't, I don't want to say uneducated, it's people who are uneducated, but people who just don't have the knowledge yet on what we're talking about. So for example, what you're saying about that picture of a cow on the fields, and people are saying, cows are bad. Well, no, they're not. They're very key to our biodiversity and to like a circular economy, but a lot of people don't see it that way.
I hope you've kicked your feet up and got comfy and enjoying another fantastic episode of the R2Kast with another really interesting guest. I would just like to quickly take another second to plug the sponsors of the show today, the Scottish Farmer, and I would strongly advise you to go out and pick one up this week and see even more of the fantastic people that are in our industry.
You're absolutely right. I mean, the weirdest thing goes viral, and quite often that weirdest thing is the thing that's quite dramatic and the folk can buy into. And
absolutely,
and as an industry, the things we don't want to go viral. But if you look, my interest, a massive interest of mine, and it's got to the stage of even writing a PhD proposal and stuff like that, is the potential sort of positive impact of social media on the agricultural sector, looking at influencers, looking at all that sort of thing. But the problem is it's so much harder to sell positivity than shocking negativity. That's
exactly. Yeah. And as you say, like the weirdest things go viral, and in that, also the worst things go viral. People like to latch on to something that they feel they can create an opinion around, and that is so often the bad stuff. Whereas I think what I want to do personally is create something that's really positive and that speaks to more people. And it's daunting to sort of look at a platform like TikTok and think about all the bad things that can happen.
Yeah, what can go wrong today?
Exactly. There's a list as long as my arms.
It's interesting what you said about sort of going on to sort of longer form video and audio content. And I think if I found anything with a podcast, and I think I'm probably at the stage that I'm able to say I know a wee bit about it now, is there's like an endearment to reality. People enjoy the fact that, I mean, how they can listen to me for an hour, I don't know. It's probably because everyone else is speaking for longer than me. And one of my best mates did say I have a face for podcasting. So.
But that's harsh.
It's very harsh. I mean, he made a point of putting it in the Young Farmers programme for their concert and everything with my advert. But anyway, the people buy into the fact, and they do speak to me at shows and stuff. They're like, I just like that you talk about your life and you talk about normality. And I think, I've got you five guys on here, and you might see a podcast that's at the NFU and think it's going to be, we do this, we do this, we do this, we do this. And I don't think that really sells. People want to hear that this is five inspiring and passionate women behind NFU, and they want to hear your stories and they want to hear what's involved. And that's, people buy into that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're proud of it. So yeah, it's true, and I would say there's definitely a market for that. It's smaller because it's not 7-second videos of cats jumping and people falling off their bikes, but it's something that I don't want to say the people that matter. That's so wrong, but people that really are looking into it are sort of buying into it, and that's got to be a positive thing. which sort of leads me on to yourself, Beatrice. You've been involved in that contact with Parliament and whatnot, and I assume that communication has changed, whereas maybe not in the couple of years or 3 years, I think it was you said that you've been involved, but it'll have moved away from the conventional getting in touch and saying, is that also, is that changing as well?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, lots and lots of politicians are now much more active on Twitter, and, it's much more direct. you can contact them, much quicker, and it has changed very much. But I think something that we're very lucky in Scotland is the accessibility of politicians to people, not just us, but other people as well. And spending time down in Westminster, it feels much more removed and much harder to maybe that's being a bit mean, but I don't know. And I think we're very lucky with Scottish Parliament that it is easy to engage effectively and have build up relationships with them up here. So yeah.
Yeah, definitely. We don't need to get into the independence chat, but no, 100%. And I don't know, it's fun to hear you bring different folk on here. Like, this is arguably a flex in some ways, but I spoke to the food and policy lead for the government in Rwanda, right? I had him on the podcast. So you don't know how that happens, like very strange, but Regis Umajuraneza is one of the coolest names I've ever heard. And Regis spoke a lot about that sort of dialogue with the masses, as he would say. And it was interesting to hear that it was so social media based. So just about everything was social media based. It was like, we don't really do TV, we don't do newspapers or any sort of, not even conventional media at this point. It's old media, isn't it, really? And it's quite cool to see that change. I mean, you mentioned you're sort of scared of TikTok. I mean, I am not a fan of Twitter. I'm not a fan of that place, but it's how anyone of any sort of standing uses to communicate. And it's slightly open in that you can sort of get back in that sense.
I think it's so useful because it moves so quickly. If you're putting something out on TV, if you're putting together a news special, you need an entire team to put that together. You need producers, you need editors, you need directors, you need someone on sound. It's a whole mission. Whereas with social media, I can put my phone up and I can say 30 seconds worth of stuff and I can send it out to potentially millions of people. And I think that's one of the most incredible things about social media, but it is also one of the most scary things.
Yeah, it's a double-edged sword, that, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I had a random video where I took some drone shots of my mate that's got out to 110,000 folk last week. It's just random. Like, it's been picked up in Poland and India. So it's not my target demographic, I'll be honest, but it's went somewhere. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting. I guess I've got a bit of a question for all of you, and it's again, every time, well, the one time I said that before, it looked like everyone wanted to jump off camera, but what do you think? NFU's been around for however long, I don't know, I assume that's an age, a number that's out there somewhere, but what do you think the changes are going to be in the coming years? Because we've spoken about Brexit, we've spoken about, you mentioned Ukraine at one point, Lisa, we're seeing a lot of things. I mean, hopefully we're not going to see something like Ukraine anytime soon. But I said that with way too much of a laugh in my voice. I didn't mean it that way. I just meant in general, I hope that's not something we're seeing in the sort of soon future. What do you think NFU's role is going to be, and is it going to change slightly in the next decade or so?
I don't know. I'm probably not the person to speak about this, so I'll let everyone else go.
I think it's hard to think on it like I'll think about it in like an LFA and a livestock capacity, but it is kind of pulling together food production, climate and biodiversity all in. They're not one or the other, they're kind of all complementary. And from an LFA point of view, there's a huge amount of public goods that are produced that don't have a market return. So our job is to make sure that government are clear that we need to be supported for the public goods that they benefit from, whether that's carbon sequestration, biodiversity of beasties living in dry stone dikes and hefted flocks and everything, and tick management control. So yeah, our role is to kind of bring together what Scottish Government want, and they've outlined it quite clearly, but also saying we're not the enemy, we actually already deliver this, you need to recognise that and marry it up across the board and kind of make sure that the policy supports that we're not penalised or demonised, that actually we're part of the solution and part of the overall aim on where Scotland will get to. That's kind of my comments from... Yeah,
that makes a lot of sense, Lisa. And I guess yourself, Sarah, sort of plays the other side of, the farming side alongside with the environmental side. What do you think the environment side of things?
I mean, broadly, I think our role will stay the same. I think we'll still be here and we'll still be lobbying for Scottish agriculture. And yeah, honestly, just to echo what I said in terms of it's those three things for us. It's not just one, i.e. food production or climate and biodiversity. It's all three, and we have to, continually spread the message that those three things can be achieved in tandem. But we need a lot more support from the other side, from government, to get there. I think going forward, as the industry does shift towards this kind of new era, as we'll say it is, we hopefully will see a lot more kind of upskilling of the industry. It will be a lot more professionalized, upskilled. People will hopefully take these challenges on and see the benefits that working or farming with climate and nature in mind can actually bring other benefits. I think now it's feeling a little bit uncertain and that it's a threat, but hopefully going forward with that kind of certainty and clarity, that it will actually become just a more robust industry all round.
I think to echo that, I've already said my piece, but there's things that like the next generation, things like technology and stuff, actually nature and climate and biodiversity are all intertwined, but there's things that we could do actually that are going to deliver more efficient business returns or something like that. So if you're able to have less mortalities in your herd, then that actually might boost your bottom line and things like that. It might not be as direct like that, and like Sarah says, the uncertainty is hard to look past it, but it'd be good to have that vision and see it through.
Well, I mean, they say we're in, I've just realised it's getting dark, I forgot I don't have a light on. There's, oh my God, they're saying that, we're in that sort of fifth, arguably sixth agricultural revolution. It's sort of based on data. And it's kind of crazy that that's what agriculture is now, but it's so true. I mean, we've had speakers in recently, must be thinking I'm saying your name, Lisa, recently, of, just speaking about the role of data. And I've always been quite aware of the role of data, but my God, it's impressive what we can do now. And in 5 years' time, it's going to be quite worrying. I guess for yourself, Beatrice, on the sort of the close future, if you will, you're going to be seeing a lot of changes, whether that's a change in First Minister, got it, I know what I'm talking about, whether that's a change in Prime Ministers, because it's certainly been something they've been quite good at in the last year, and just general sort of looking at independence chats and Brexits and whatnot. Is it going to change, or is it going to be the same? It's just going to be sort of getting to know new people, I guess.
I mean, we're totally apolitical, so we don't get...
I know that, yeah, sorry.
Yeah, so I just had to say that so I can speak tonight. Thank you. Sure. For me, so I'm totally new to the sector, and yes, agricultural policy is on the route to changing, and it's there's a lot of people that are looking for more information about that and understanding a bit more. But one of the things that struck me is that when I go and speak to a farmer and say to them, as a politician wanting to come and speak to you what you're doing about climate change, and they say, well, I'm not doing anything about climate change. And I'm like, well, and I can sit in the farm and point at things and say, well, you're doing this, you're doing that. And I go, oh yeah, I am actually doing this, and we're doing this. And so I think that there's an education piece there, that yes, there's more to go and bring everybody with us and stuff, but there's so much great innovation work going on, and it does benefit the climate, and it does benefit biodiversity. And like Lisa said as well, it sometimes helps the bottom line too. So I think for me, the near future is, making sure that politicians understand that and understand that there's lots of great work going on, and that by working together, we can help governments deliver ambitions with regards to green ambitions, because we care about our land. There was somebody that gave evidence to the Scottish Parliament a few weeks ago, and in her introduction, he said, there's nobody who cares more about their land than a farmer. and
obviously not, absolutely.
But I think that's not what you hear on the news. And even there was something on there was a Scottish show that I saw just a few weeks ago, and it sounded like farmers were really awful and not, every farmer I've met, they care about their land. There's nobody that cares about it more than them. And I think that's something that more people need to understand.
It would be mental for them not to.
but they are portrayed as...
Yeah, for
not.
Sure. Just out of interest, Beatrice, what was your background before? it wasn't farm-based. What was it?
I worked for the Scotch Whisky Association for 10 years, and then prior to that I lobbied for the British Medical Association. So I've had doctors, whisky, and now farmers.
It's quite embarrassing. You already told me that. I'm just I'll pretend I'm good at what I'm doing, but I'm not doing well. It's here. I'm conscious we've been speaking for an hour and 10 minutes, and it does sort of fly by when you're having fun, doesn't it? You're all sitting there thinking it feels like 4. But I'm conscious it's a nice evening, and I don't want to hold you forever. But there's sort of 2 questions I sort of ask everyone at the end. It's one of them sort of aimed at you individually. We'll go around everyone, and one of them sort of aimed at the NFU in general. So it's one of those ones that's kind of unfortunate for the person that's last. So I'm trying to work out a way to do this. It seems a bit unfair. We went clockwise last time, so we'll go anti-clockwise from the different side of the clock that's not a clock, that's a weird square. So we're going to start with yourself, Beatrice. And the two questions are, one, where do you see yourself? So that's the sort of self one. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the second one is, if you had to quickly explain NFUS to someone who knew nothing about it in the street, how would you do it? Emmy's, for those of you who can't see, you can only see me at the minute. Emmy's just went like this off camera. Sorry to call you out there, Emmy, that was nasty.
Well, I'll tackle the last one first, I suppose. The NFUS, is promoting a sustainable, thriving farming sector for the country. That's, I think, I'd say that in a nutshell. And where do I see myself in 5 years' time? I really don't know. I'm really still taxiing my children around, because that's something that I spend a lot of my free time doing just now.
Keeping them wherever they're going. No, absolutely. That was a very good, quick, this is how I see NFUS. Do you know, it's funny, I ask people to do these things, and one day, just to show off, episode number 45, Crawford Niven said to me, he was like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And I was like, So it's probably a bit unfair of me, but next is in my list is Penny. Penny, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And a quick description of NFUS. You're muted again, Penny.
Where do I see myself in 5 years' time? Well, I've been 15 years with NFUS, and I feel very passionately still about it. So quite possibly I will still be here in 5 years' time. Hopefully still flying the flag for Scottish agriculture. And as far as NFUS descriptions of them, basically I would say we are the collective voice for Scottish agriculture. We lobby on behalf of agriculture individuals. We are their voice.
You are very good at this. I was expecting you to struggle a bit more, but he's absolutely smashed it so far. I'm going to apologise to you, Sarah, because Sarah, you're actually going to be last, so we'll give you a bit of time to try and work. I do apologise, and I should probably apologise to you, Sarah, in that throughout the whole thing, you're sort of furthest across this side of my tablet. So when you're talking, I'm probably not looking at you at all. I am looking at you, but you probably doesn't look like I am. Emmy, yourself, 5 years and a quick description, NFUS.
I think saying where I am in 5 years is definitely a big question. I think I've only just started my career. I'm 22, so thinking where I'm going to be in 5 years is a huge thing. I think I would like to still be doing social media. I would love to still be involved in Scottish agriculture. I think it's a wonderful sector to be a part of, and I see a lot of positivity in the future of that through social media. So yeah, I'd like to still be involved in 5 years if they'll keep me.
I'm sure they will.
My probation isn't up yet, so there's still time. And I think
there's still time. This is one thing to do.
Coming back from that, I think NFUS is just a wonderful tool for everyone in agriculture in Scotland. I think it's a great place to get more information about the industry. And I think especially not just for people in agriculture, but for people on the outside of it who maybe don't know a lot and want to learn more. I think there's a lot of resources that we've got available. I think it's a great place to learn as well as sort of push things forwards politically with lobbying.
Absolutely. And if it makes you feel better, you make you feel really old. It just makes you feel really
Sorry.
old. That's impressive. Lisa?
I'll start with what NFUS is. I feel like I spend my life explaining this to friends. My go-to is that we're a lobbying organisation, a membership organisation that lobbies for farmers. And I think, yeah, you could say that, and what does that really mean? But yeah, like say a profitable, and I don't actually know what our vision is. I've forgotten it now. Was it a profitable and viable, sustainable agriculture industry? So anything that makes that happen, and kind of, yeah, farmers spend a lot of time working on their own, and they spend a lot of time, and the thought of trying to take on policy alongside that must be mental. So we do some really important work for people that do really important work for our environment and food security. So yeah, that's a wishy-washy answer. Where do I see myself in 5 years? I'd like to say I'm the same as Emmy, but I'm not quite a bit, I'm older than Emmy. So I think I'd still like to be here. I really enjoy my job. I find it really, really rewarding. And I think hopefully in 5 years' time, I'll be able to confidently sit in something like this and answer all the questions and not waffle around being new. If in 5 years I'm still saying, oh, I'm new, bear with me, then you can pull me up on it and use this.
Yeah, you might be doing something slightly different, but I don't think you have to be worried about answering questions well and stuff. It's certainly not been an issue at all for any of you at all. And I think I've last but not least at least four of you. So Sarah, last but not least yourself.
No, that's fine. Give me some more time to think about my answer. Coming not from an agricultural background, my friends ask me all the time what NFUS is, but I think that kind of description I kind of mentioned before about being a middle person is quite a good one, in that you are kind of looking at government and working with them and highlighting to them the farmers' priorities of what would work practically on farm with the things that they want to bring in, and then on the other hand you're like translating policy into a kind of language or a kind of real life implications of what that will mean to a farmer. So you are kind of sitting in the middle and kind of playing both sides, I guess. That's kind of what NFUS does. In terms of where I'd want to be in 5 years, being a bit older than the other previous two, I really don't know either. I hope I'm still working in this area. I'm really passionate about biodiversity and the environment. I think there's so many good opportunities, in the next couple of years as well in this area. It's only just kind of starting to get going. So yeah, I really hope I'm still working in this area as well. Hopefully with all these lovely people as well.
Excellent. Well, do you know it's you said older than the last two, as you said, Sarah. I'm just thinking about it, Emmy. I think you're the fourth youngest on the podcast out of 129 so far. I think, which is great. And in fairness, one of them was two. So
that's a difficult one to beat.
Yeah, and well, actually, two of them have been two. Len and Tamish were running around. So that's Emma Gray and you and Irvin's kids, and then another couple's kid. So yeah, it must be. No, you'll be fifth. Pretty good going.
That is good going.
Yeah, it is. Why am I such a number nerd? It's so sad. Anyway, here we've been sitting chatting for pretty much an hour and a half. It does really go by quickly, certainly for myself, when it's something I'm really interested in. This has been one I really have been. So I do appreciate all your time. Thank you very much for that. First of all, I hope you guys have enjoyed coming on. I hope it's not been like, hope it's been good enough for you. So yeah,
it's been really enjoyable, and thank you again for inviting us on.
No, here, not at all. And it's probably it's probably one of those things. NFUS is probably one I could do a few times with a different batch of folk every time. There'll be a lot of yous involved, I am sure. So yeah, thank you for that. I appreciate it hugely. For those of you listening, that was obviously episode number 98 with five guys from not with five guys. We haven't got the fast food chain on yet. That'll happen one day. But five folk from NFUS today, which was really good, and I really enjoyed it. So thank you to Beatrice, Lisa, Sarah, Emmy, and Benny. Thank you all for that. What was this? Yeah, one more episode. Apparently, I can't talk at all. So it's mixed. I actually meant to mix talk and speak there, but now it looks like I'm an idiot. I genuinely meant that, and now it looks like I can't speak at all. Anyway, the next episode is the last episode with only 2 digits at it, which is quite exciting. 100 episodes of the podcast is pretty good going. Wonder if we'll hit 4 figures. I wonder if we'll hit 4 figures. That'd be quite exciting. Proper take out Joe Rogan. I'll need to change my stature and kill some more elk. So yeah, 99 speak a lot of mental health, hoof trimming, triplets, human triplets, which is quite exciting. The guy had them. That wouldn't be just random triplets. Just a random chat about triplets. That'd be weird. It's a really good episode. And then the next one is the 100. As I said, it's been filmed. It's a good episode. I'm really looking forward to sharing it with you all. There's going to be 3 episodes in 4 days. There's going to be Friday, Saturday, Monday, and from now on we'll be having 8 releases a month. Hopefully by December we'll have that up to 12 or maybe even 16 a month. So putting out a lot of content there. And yes, you must be bored of hearing my voice. But thanks again for listening. Thanks to everyone for coming on. Appreciate your time hugely. And we'll see you in the next one for R2Kast number 99 with Neil Barrett. See you then.
I hope you've enjoyed another excellent episode of the R2Kast. I just want to take this moment to quickly thank our primary sponsors once more, A-Plan Rural. If you follow A-Plan on social media, you'll see the work they're doing to really promote British farming and back our industry. It's been a pleasure working alongside A-Plan Rural so far, and long may it continue. The values of A-Plan Rural runs perfectly in line with the whole mantra of Rural to Kitchen, and I'm glad to have them on board. Check them out on Instagram at A-Plan Rural and on Facebook at A-Plan Rural Insurance. See you for the next podcast.